welcome. I would like to welcome you to episode 453 of the Unpopular Podcast. This is the man, the myth, the legend, Jalen Hunter. Here at the Unpopular Podcast, I'm not really asked to agree with me. I'm asked you to hear me out. Well, we've officially finished week one of college football, NFL football, and there is a lot to talk about. In fact, we just reached week two of college football and week one of the NFL football. I'm going to start off with college football because obviously that happened on Thursday or Saturday, and obviously the NFL happened Sunday. But where I want to start this episode is something simple. I said this before, and I will say it again. When you zig when everyone's zagging, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I promote people, programs, organizations doing their own thing. I don't think that you have to, go with the crowd and do everything that you wanted that everyone else does. I love individuality. I love, carving out a lane for yourself. But when you zig and everyone zags, when you meet adversity, and there are times when that adversity could overcome you, that does not help you in the case of when you're trying to advance. What do I mean by that? Well, I feel like I'm beating around the bush. What do I mean by that? When I did my college football playoffs, and I, gave my prediction of the 12 teams that were going to make it, I talked about Notre Dame, and I said being independent helps Notre Dame in a lot of areas. It also hinders Notre Dame if they find themselves hit that adversity train. I said it helps because you're able to build your schedule a little bit differently than a team that has a conference like, Oregon. They have to play certain teams because they're in the Big Ten now. Or Alabama, there's certain teams they have to play because they're in the SEC. When you're Notre Dame, you're independent. You can pretty much handpick who you play and who you don't, because you're not attached, you're not drawn to a conference. So you can, if you obviously, essentially, this is not what they're doing, but you could handpick. You can have an entire schedule of ranked opponents if you want it. Obviously, they're not doing that, and I don't think that would be smart. But you could have an entire schedule of ranked opponents. And if you beat all of them, there is no question who would be the number one overall team. What you do see Notre Dame doing is they'll sprinkle in some extremely tough games while still maintaining, I guess, relevancy in their schedule, so that if they win out, while it is easier for them because they don't have to go up against a Tennessee, they don't have to go up against an Alabama, they don't have to go up against Ohio State. While it's easier for them, what we saw on Saturday lands on the other side of that coin. I also said that being an independent can hurt when you hit adversity, because the committee there's no loyalty to a conference. Meaning, if they want to lean heavily on the SEC, they'll look at Texas, they'll look at Oklahoma, they'll look at Alabama, they'll look at Auburn, they'll look at Tennessee, they'll look at those type of teams. Not saying that this is what they'll do, but when you're in a conference, if you lose to a lower level school, you have an opportunity to play a big name school. It's pretty much uniform. You have to. On Saturday, Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois. They lost 16-14. When Florida State lost, I said that, especially losing twice, They lost to Georgia Tech, and they lost to I forgot the second school. Georgia Tech and Boston College. When they lost to Georgia Tech and Boston College, I said that essentially their road to the college football playoff was over. Because they don't have, even though they're in the ACC, if you look at their schedule, it looked like it was going to be, it would favor them getting into the college football playoffs if they handled the schools that they were supposed to handle. Remember, Florida State came in ranked 10th, meaning the committee had Florida State very high on their ranking scale. And when you see Florida State still has to play Clemson, they still have to play Miami. There was a path where Florida State definitely was going to make the college football playoffs if they handled their business. But seeing as though they lost to a Georgia Tech, who just lost, by the way, to Syracuse, a team that lost to Boston College. I think Boston College is 2-0, but still. That essentially knocks them out. Florida State, I'm not saying they can't win the ACC, but it's going to take a Herculean effort just to do that. And on top of that, the committee is not going to forget how they lost to a Boston College and to a Georgia Tech. The thing that Florida State has over Notre Dame is as part of a conference. While, yes, you can say that the ACC is a weaker conference than, let's say, a Big Ten or SEC, it's still a conference, and you still have teams like Miami. You still have teams like Clemson that still have rankings next to their name. Notre Dame losing to North Illinois. I'm not going to say that their college football playoff dreams is over. I'm not going to say that. But if you're doing it on a percentage scale, I'm not going to say that it's 0%. But it's let's say 10%. There's a 10% chance now that Notre Dame makes it to the college football playoffs. There's a difference between looking bad and still winning, like Oregon. Oregon has looked bad the first game against Idaho and the second game against Boise State. Homie from Boise State, the running back, I forgot his name. He's pretty much the Heisman favorite right now. He ran up and down Oregon. But Oregon pulled it out and won 37-34. There's a difference between not looking great and winning and not looking great and losing to a team that you shouldn't have lost to. There's always 1 week in every sport, every single sport. You can look it up too. There's always 1 week in every team sport where things don't go the way that's supposed to. Where there's just craziness, a bunch of top teams lose or a bunch of top teams struggle. I'm not saying that there won't be another week like that, but this week was the week. Alabama, even though if you look at the score, they beat South Florida 42-16, but they were struggling majority of the game. In fact, there was a good portion of the fourth quarter where it looked like South Florida could pull it out against Alabama if it wasn't for a couple of bounces that went Alabama's way. Again, I know when you look at 42-16, it's like, damn. But yeah, that game was a lot closer than the score. We can talk about Oklahoma. They won in a dogfight against Houston. They won, 16-12. Again, we just talked about Oregon beating Boise State. Well, Boise State, I did have them making the college football playoffs. They're still unranked, and they still are not great defensively. You kind of saw that. Oregon had 2 special teams touchdowns. So this week, a lot of teams struggled. But again, there's a difference between struggling and winning, like Oregon did, like Oklahoma did, like Alabama did for 3.5 quarters, and struggling and losing like Notre Dame did. When you look at Notre Dame's schedule, yes, they still have some top-ranked teams. But it's going to be tough making the college because Notre Dame, yeah, is good beating Texas A&M. But the questions that we've had about Notre Dame isn't can they beat top-ranked teams? It's can they be consistent? We saw that a year ago. They'll beat a top-ranked team, but then go on and lose to a North Illinois. And trust me, when you are independent, the last thing you can afford is inconsistency. Because when you have a committee look at your road and there's a bump as steep as North Illinois, that could be the determining factor, which is why I'm not going to say that they're 0%. But it's damn near close to 0. Now, obviously, things could change. I think they still have to play Miami with Cam Ward, and they could beat them. I think they still have to play Florida State, but I don't even think that's a real good matchup at this point, seeing as though Florida State is 0-2 as we speak. But I said it. I said it when I gave my college football playoff predictions. Now, yes, I will admit that I did say that Notre Dame was going to make it in the college football playoffs because I thought that they would beat a team like North Illinois. But I did say it. I said that being an independent has high highs, has extremely good benefits, but it also has extreme risks and extreme lows. And as we're seeing, when you lose to a team like this, a team that you had to pay, might I add, you had to pay $1 million+ just for them to play you. Because a team like that is expected to lose. So you had like, yo, we'll pay you to play us. And you lose? Come on, dog. It's going to be tough. Again, I'm not saying that the door is closed for the college football playoffs for Notre Dame, but it's as jarred as it's going to be. I'll say that. Speaking, and this is the last thing we'll talk about with college football. Again, Oregon, they beat Boise State. I know I had Oregon win the national championship, and I'm going to stick by that pick, but it's not looking too good right now. Things can change, obviously. It's the first 2 weeks, but if you look, there's really only 3 teams that look incredible. We'll talk about one in a second, but you also have Ohio State and Georgia. Those teams look like juggernauts, and as we speak, I don't think Oregon is anywhere close to Ohio State in the Big Ten, but things can change. Alabama, they did struggle a little bit with South Florida, but they turned it on, you know. But the last thing I want to talk about before we get to the NFL. We knew it. We knew it. But a lot of people were in denial about it. I talk about this in the NFL a lot. In fact, I'm probably going to address it again when we talk about the Patriots and Bengals game. I said that the last thing you want to do as a team, as an organization, as a program, speaking of college football, is have an extremely loud offseason. And when I mean loud offseason, I mean noise that isn't particularly good around your team. The last thing you want to do is go into a season with a bunch of noise and expect to play at your top tier shape, top tier potential. It's damn near impossible. It's almost impossible for the NFL. It's almost closer to impossible for college football because you're dealing with kids. You're dealing with teenagers that's aspiring to make it to the NFL. So usually the noise that you hear in the NFL offseason is much different than the noise that you hear in college football offseason. And what did we hear coming out of Michigan all throughout the offseason? We heard about there could be sanctions, there could be violations, or there could be penalties handed down to Michigan for the sign stealing. Jim Harbaugh leaves Michigan to go to LA Chargers. Shamar Moore has been appointed the new head coach. And they lost nearly every single, not all, but nearly every single starter, at least on the offensive side of the ball, to either the draft or graduation. They lost their starting quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. They lost their starting running back in Blake Corum. They lost their key defensive players. They lost offensive linemen. Nearly every single person that was important to that national championship team a year ago is gone. So it brings me back to what I was saying. We knew this was going to happen. I think when the season started and we saw that Michigan was ranked 9th, that was probably the most out of respect ranking I've ever seen. Because nothing about this Michigan team said that it should be 9th. I'm not saying that it should be ranked. I'm saying I don't think it should be 9th. The only reason why it was 9th is because it's kind of crazy putting a national champion or reigning national champion outside the top 10. So they put it as close to outside the top 10 as they could. But we should have known, man. We should have known that this team was going to struggle. Let's say that. Obviously, their defense is still good. There were some players that stayed from the national championship team on the defensive side of the ball that, while it doesn't mask all the issues that their defense does have, they have some key players. And offensively, you still have Donovan, I forgot his last name, the running back, or Donovan is his last name. Like you have there are some semblance of last year's team, but it's very, very faint. Well, it's very difficult to retool in college football, especially when you lose as much as Michigan lost. And when you look and you see that they struggle offensively in game one, they won, but if it wasn't because of their offense, it was because their defense came to play. You knew they were going to struggle when you go up against a juggernaut, when you go up against a team that seems like it has it all clicking. And they played Texas on Saturday. And Texas, even though I know it still looks like a blowout, and it is 31-12, but that score was not indicative of the entire game. It was worse. Texas beat Michigan like they stole something. It kind of felt there was a there was a point early on actually that I remember saying to myself watching the game like, "Yo, Michigan doesn't deserve to be on this field with Texas." I talked about it earlier, man. There's 3 teams that is just steamrolling through college football right now. There is Georgia, Ohio State, and Texas. Right now, it feels like those 3 is the gold standard of college football. Those are the 3 top. Those 3 teams are in a tier of their own. And then you have the rest. In Michigan, again, bro, I don't know what you expect. You lost a future Hall of Famer as a coach. You lost your starting quarterback for a national championship team. Your starting running back for a national. In fact, Blake Corum is the school's leading rusher of all time. It's going to be a long. I'm not saying that Michigan isn't going to be good. But there's a reason why, if I remember correctly, there's a reason why I did not put them in the college football playoffs. I don't think they're going to be that good. They're going to try. I'm never going to accuse them of not trying. But do I think they're going to be good? Nah. I don't think so. I don't think it's over with for the program. And I want nothing more than Shamar Moore to succeed. But there's a reason why the meme is going around of Shamar Moore just looking depleted. And the caption is, when you realize you're the fall guy. Because remember, a lot of these punishment for the sign stealing still has not come down yet. It was a crazy week in college football, man. Texas did their thing. We talked about Notre Dame. Shouts out to McCord at Syracuse for beating Georgia Tech, which also cements why I think that is over with for Florida State, because the team that beat you in Dublin, Ireland, you lost. No, they lost to Syracuse. So, yeah, man, I think next or this week is going to get a little interesting. You see some old rivalries like Oregon playing Oregon State. I think there has to be a time when Oregon looks good, bro. Oregon has to. You can see glimpses, like you can see that there is a good team in the pile somewhere, but Oregon is struggling. I'm not going to hold you. As a person that picked them as the national championship, they are struggling. And they just don't look like a coherent team right now. They should have blown out Boise State, but there was 2 back-to-back drives that ended in turnovers. So, yeah, college football is roaring along, and we'll see what happens. Let's get to the NFL. Let me first apologize. I'm not the most geographical person. And I realized when I was talking about the Eagles going up against the Packers, I kept saying Istanbul, which they were not. They were at San Pablo, Brazil. I kept saying Istanbul, Brazil. For people that don't know, Istanbul is not in Brazil. So I watched the episode over and I was like, yo, why do I keep saying Istanbul? Yeah. I was tweaking on that. I apologize. I meant San Paulo. But seeing as though that was the first game, when I recorded last episode, I recorded on Friday, and obviously you guys got the episode on Saturday. While I recorded it, or before I recorded, or after I recorded, Jesus loves you, the Packers played the Eagles. Now, obviously, this is going to be my segment where I break down every game in week 1 of the NFL. Obviously, some breakdowns are going to be longer than others, but let's start with the Packers and Eagles. What this game showed me is a couple things. One, it emphasized just how poor of an organization the New York Giants are. We're going to talk about them in a second, but the Giants letting Saquon Barkley go for nothing was kind of crazy to me. Yeah, I don't know. And especially when you see how vital and how important he was to the bro. He had 3 touchdowns in his debut. They went to Sao Paulo, and this man Saquon got busy. And on top of that, I also realized, the Packers have a chance to be really good if Jordan Love is healthy. I know he has I think it's an ACL sprain, which it definitely looked scarier than it was. Both these teams are good, but there are the issues that the Eagles had, they were able to overcome faster than the Packers. And when you have someone like Saquon Barkley, mind you, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, who did get a touchdown, but they had quiet nights compared to this win was mainly on the back of Saquon Barkley, the player that the Giants just let go for nothing. They didn't even trade him. They let him go. It's still going to be a little interesting how they deal with not having Jason Kelce on the roster. You kind of saw early on the connection issues with the center and Jalen Hurts. I mean, they fumbled a snap, but I do think that the Eagles are going to be a very good team. Again, that's one of the 3 teams that I have at least vying for a Super Bowl spot in the NFC. And I think the Packers are going to be really good. The Packers could have won that game if it wasn't for, I think the injury to, well, no, that was at the end of the game. There was some plays that I'm sure that Jalen or Jordan Love would like to have back. But I said that going into the game. I said, the Packers do not have to win. They just can't look bad. And they didn't. They looked there's a lot of people that have high expectations for the Packers going into this year. And you saw it, the connection with Jordan Love and Christian Watson was pretty good. Romeo Doubs really didn't do much, but still. And then it was pretty much run by committee. Josh Jacobs, while he didn't have the greatest game, he did make an imprint towards the end of the game. So I think the Packers are going to be really good. But like I said, the Eagles, they looked good. They looked really good. There were times when they didn't, obviously, but I think they'll be all right. And they went to Sao Paulo, Brazil, not Istanbul, Brazil, because Istanbul is definitely in Turkey. I kept saying Istanbul too, like confidently. That's crazy. But shouts out to the Eagles for beating the Packers 34-29. Let's go on to the other game that I want to discuss. Actually, I'm going to discuss every game, but the next game is the Cowboys and the Browns. First of all, shouts out to Dak Prescott for getting his, I think it was a 4-year extension, like 3 hours before the game. Like when that thing hit my alert, I was like, wait, damn, the game just started. Because that's funny. I saw the Dak Prescott got his extension. alert, and then maybe 5-10 minutes later I saw that Jamar Chase did not reach an agreement. So that was kind of interesting. But congratulations to the Cowboys for beating the Browns 33-17. On the Cowboys side, Dak Prescott and the Cowboys, they didn't look the greatest, but when the Browns gave them opportunities, they seized it. When the Browns had defensive lapses, they seized it. When the Browns failed to struggle and put the Cowboys in good field goal positioning, they filled it, or they seized it. The Cowboys, what they did was when they were handed gifts, when they were allotted opportunities, they took it. When you talk about CeeDee Lamb did have an incredible catch. Brandon Cook scored. Ezekiel Elliott scored. Like, they didn't have the greatest game, especially when you look at like Dak Prescott numbers, but he played pretty well. And this team, especially defensively, Micah Parsons just wrecked this entire game. The offensive line for the Browns just could not handle the pressure from the Cowboys. And the Cowboys did their thing. They wreaked havoc, trust and believe. So, shouts out to the Cowboys for beating the Browns. Now we have to talk about the Browns, and that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this high on the docket. I made it very clear and very specific when we were talking about when I was doing my divisional breakdown and I got to the NFC North. I talked about the Cleveland Browns. I said as clear as day, this is the most important season for Deshaun Watson's career he's ever experienced. I talked about Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. And I talked about how important this season is for both of them. And obviously we'll talk about the both of them when we talk about the Steelers and Falcons. But I said that there is not a player in this league that has more riding on this season than Deshaun Watson. I'm not going to talk about the allegation that came out 2 days ago. I'm going to talk about what we saw on the field. And I'm also going to tie into everything that we know contractually about Deshaun Watson. Until Sunday, Deshaun Watson had the most guaranteed money in NFL history. We know that Deshaun Watson, at one point of his career, was widely considered one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. We also know that that time in which we speak was a while ago. And since then, and honestly, since getting his paycheck, since getting the deal that the Browns gave him, Deshaun Watson has looked far, not just from the quarterback that he used to be. He looks nothing close to a starting quarterback. It looks like his confidence is gone at times. It looks like the game is too fast for him. It looks like he just doesn't have accuracy. That's what we've seen. And I think what hurt him the most, honestly, had nothing to do with him. And that was the success that Joe Flacco had as the starting quarterback last year for the Browns, essentially getting them into the playoffs. Now, yes, they lost to the Houston Texans, but still, they made it to the playoffs, something that they were unable to do with Deshaun Watson. They look like a competent team, something that they did not look like with Deshaun Watson. Last year, while yes, Joe Flacco was a big part, even though he was very, I think he, for the time that he actually played, he led the league in interceptions. But we said that this year is different. This year, the defense is not going to be able to carry them in situations. It's going to have to be the offense. And I even went as far as to say, due to roster-wise, I had no problem because the roster is still a Super Bowl caliber roster. I had them number 2 in the AFC North. Well, then we get to Sunday's game against the Cowboys. And all the issues that we have had with Deshaun Watson as a quarterback on the field reared its ugly head in a 33-17 loss. Deshaun Watson held the ball too long. There was times when it didn't even look like he was throwing to anybody that was on the field. There was multiple times where it looked like he was throwing the ball to the first or second row of the stands. He overthrew a bunch of players. He underthrew a bunch of players. He threw behind them. He held the ball too long, which caused costly sacks. Deshaun Watson, in all intents and purposes, was horrible. Now, I will say this. I am looking at Kevin Stefanski as well. It doesn't look like the offense that they have is suitable for or leans on the strengths of Deshaun Watson. It looks like it does look like the game plan that the Browns had just wasn't a good game plan offensively. However, it's crazy how stark of a difference it looked watching Dak Prescott play on the same field as Deshaun Watson. It didn't even look, it shouldn't have been close. And it wasn't close. As unfortunate as it is, contracts money dictates expectation in a lot of cases. If you're paid X amount of money, you're expected to produce. That's why people are losing patience with someone like Justin Herbert, with someone like Trevor Lawrence. That's why people are losing patience with someone like Brandon Ayuk. We'll talk about the Jets game in a second. At some point, the money that they give you has to it produces more expectations. And Deshaun Watson until Sunday being the most or having the most guaranteed money in NFL history has looked nowhere close to not just the highest paid quarterback in NFL history. He looks nowhere close to a starting quarterback. That is the problem. We can talk about how great he looked in Houston. We can talk about how he was once one of the, you can argue, a top 5 quarterback, maybe even top 3 in the league. And all of that would be true. But I would combat and say, do you understand how long ago that was? Sports is a what have you done for me lately place. And if you look at what Deshaun Watson has done lately, it has not been anywhere close to the money that he is being paid. It's just one game. I will say that. We're just week 1. And we saw the Ravens lose week 1. I think they're going to be very good. Last year, the Chiefs lost week 1. They won the Super Bowl. I'm not saying the Cleveland Browns and Deshaun Watson is the Chiefs and the Ravens. But what I'm saying is week 1 was such a detriment to Deshaun Watson. I'm not saying that the talk around him can't change. I'm not saying that he can't go out and ball. But week 1 looked eerily similar to what we've seen, what the norm has been for Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. And if that's the case, if what we saw from week 1 is indicative of what we're going to see for the rest of the year, not only do I foresee Jameis Winston playing, but I think that this will be the end of Deshaun Watson in the NFL. Because at that point, I think that the Browns would cut him. If teams are able to, or if teams at this point don't care about eating dead money, dead cap space, Deshaun Watson's out of here, bro. And then you have to start thinking about, okay, well, recently, what are the allegations that's against him, and what team is going to touch him? Cam Newton has no allegations on him. But the reason why he is and was never really a competent backup is because he has such a larger-than-life personality. And he is essentially too famous, too big to be a backup. Well, Deshaun Watson, due to a lot of off-the-field stuff, is bigger than life at this point. So I don't see it working past this point if he doesn't get it together. So, again, shouts out to the Cowboys for beating the Browns 33-17. And, yeah, it's going to be an important I can't stress enough how important this season is for Deshaun Watson, bro. I can't. So, we'll see. Another game that I thought was uber important to talk about is what we saw Monday night, which was the 49ers going against the Jets. Obviously, this was a bigger game for the Jets than it was the 49ers. You have a lot of expectations for the Jets. Obviously, we lost Aaron Rodgers 4 plays into last season, so this was the first time he's coming back. Yeah, the storylines were there, man. And Christian McCaffrey was a late game. Like he was scratched probably an hour before the game started. And the 49ers beat the Jets pretty handily, 32-19. And I said it. Look, the theme of this season is going to be importance. This season is important for a lot of people. And we just talked about Deshaun Watson, and that's definitely something different. But I said that the season is extremely important for this Jets team. Because, when you have a roster like this, when you're paying as much as you're paying, a roster like this, you're expected great things. Like I said, payment, money also goes hand in hand in sports with expectation. The amount of money you make changes the amount of expectations that's on you. And the fact that the Jets are one of the most expensive teams and has Aaron Rodgers and has Sauce Gardner and has Garrett Wilson and has Breece Hall, that there is a lot of expectation for this Jets team. And they lost 32. Now, again, it's week 1. But losing to the 49ers without Christian McCaffrey is not a good loss. Even though the 49ers did look ferocious on the defensive side of the ball, it's not a good loss. It's not a good loss at all. I will say that Aaron Rodgers did finish out the game, and he did look okay. He did have the free play that was a touchdown. He did have in the first quarter, I believe, he had the beautiful pass to Garrett Wilson, but the offense didn't look that good. The defense was getting torched. It would have been worse if Brandon Ayuk, which we talked about money-wise, if Brandon Ayuk caught the touchdown that he was supposed to catch. It looked bad. A lot of the play calls, a lot of the time management, a lot of the defensive schemes, it did not look good for the Jets. And again, if this season does not go the way that they think it's supposed to go, there's going to be sweeping changes. I promise you that. First being Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh, again, you've had a bad organization. The Jets have been a bad organization, but yet another coach when you look up and he has a losing record as a head coach. This is a very important year. Again, it's very tough starting out your year against the 49ers in San Francisco. I can imagine that. But, and I'm not casting any aspersions after game 1. But what I am saying is it is a uber important season. I'm not saying they have to win the Super Bowl. They can't look bad. They can't be incompetent. And there was times in that game where that's what they look like. So, shouts out to the 49ers. The 49ers, bro, the fact that they were able to beat the Jets, that is a pretty good defensive team, beat the Jets without Christian McCaffrey should scare the 49ers or the NFL. And, you know, I know Brandon Ayuk dropped the pass or dropped the touchdown or whatever, but this is also a team that didn't have its full team for pretty much all of training camp. So, yeah. Shouts out to the 49ers for beating the Jets. Let's talk about the Bears and Titans now. And the Bears game, more specifically Caleb Love, kind of mirrored a lot of what we thought, what a rookie looks like in the NFL. The Bears did ultimately beat the Titans 24-17. But trust and believe, that 24 was not because of Caleb Love. Or Caleb Williams, I'm sorry. Caleb Williams very rarely helped with that 24 points. In fact, Caleb Williams helped more with the Titans scoring 17 than the Bears scoring 24. The NFL is hard, man. And for a lot of rookies, I'm not saying they can't have great careers. It's very rare for a rookie to come out the gate just swinging. It's very rare. And I know the titles that are put on or that have been put on Caleb Williams. Rightfully so. His talent warrants the titles that he has. Once in a generational, franchise changing, all of that is warranted with the talent that he holds. But I think that people forget at times that the NFL is professionals is different from collegiate. College football is drastically different than the NFL. College basketball is drastically different than the NBA. A lot of the plays, and we saw it in this game, a lot of the plays that Caleb Williams would do off script, on the move that was so successful for him at USC did not work against the Titans. These players are faster, bigger. They scheme like they're better players. So all that it's gonna work at times, but you can't have a career off the script plays like he had at USC, because these players will catch you. The Bears won because their defense was great and their special teams was great. I'm not saying that Caleb Williams is not going to have a great career. I think he's going to have a phenomenal career. Hell, I think he's going to have a great season. But it looked like the game was too fast for him, the first game. And rightfully so. He didn't play a lot of the preseason. And this is the regular season. This is the NFL. But I will say shout out for the Bears for coming back. And I think Caleb Williams will be okay. I think this Bears team is going to be okay. There was some, I know Keenan Allen dropped a pass, but there was some, throws that were a little off from Caleb Williams, and he held the ball a little too long at times. He even said it. He had a tough time at times seeing the field and catching up to the speed of the game. Again, that's going to take time. But I think the Bears are going to be really good. I don't think they're going to be Super Bowl caliber, a Super Bowl caliber team, which I see a lot of people on TV are saying. But yeah, man, the Bears came back from, I think they were down 17 and scored 24 unanswered points, which brings me to the Titans. I said it. Look. I know what I'm talking about, man. Again, I understand that it's just game one, or I get it. Game one, it would be foolish to cash aspersions on the entire season just off of game one. I get that. But a lot of the issues that we saw with the Tennessee Titans last year is what we saw in game one. Will Levis is erratic. When Will Levis looks really good, he looks really good. When Will Levis looks really bad, he looks really bad. Some of them errant throws, the pick was it pick six that he threw? Like, bro, the man was on his knees just questioning life after that throw. Because he just Will Levis can be extremely erratic. He was like that in college, and he's like that now. The Tennessee Titans defense is really good, and I do see that, they gave him really good. DeAndre Hopkins was good. Tony Pollard looked really good, but you're only going to go as far as Will Levis takes you. So, yeah, and I don't think that's far at all. So, shouts out to the Bears for beating the Titans 24-17. Let's talk about the Patriots and Bengals. First and foremost, this was probably the biggest shocker of the week, but it probably shouldn't have been. Like I talked about when I was talking about college football, and I talked about Michigan. I said that the last thing you want to do is have a loud offseason. And there was not an offseason louder, in my opinion, than the Bengals. Whether we talk about T. Higgins, whether we talk about Joe Mixon gone, whether we talk about Jamar Chase, who's still looking for a new deal. It was a loud offseason. And T. Higgins did not play. Jamar Chase, you can say, was hampered, but if you listen to his post game, he was fine. The Patriots beat the Bengals 16-10. The Bengals did not look right at all. They looked like it was a team that was just constructed. they didn't have any, like, it didn't look good. It did not look good I'm not saying that's going to be indicative of the whole year, but the Patriots just looked better. The Bengals looked a step slow in every aspect. Joe Burrow didn't look good. Nobody looked good. That was on the Bengals. And I think things will obviously look different when T. Higgins comes back, but this could be the norm for the Bengals this year. It doesn't look like Jamar Chase is the most happiest, especially when you just lost, but when it's very hard when you're in a contract negotiation, you're holding out for a new contract and you don't get it, and you're still expected to play. Tough. Oh, I totally forgot about Hassan Reddick. He probably would have helped the Jets, but still. And shouts out to Gerard Mayo, man. The Patriots. I'm not saying he's gonna be Bill Belichick, but Gerard Mayo looked really good as the head coach of the Patriots. The Patriots look good, mind you. The Patriots probably have the least amount of talent on their roster, but they looked well coached. Jacoby Brissett looked pretty good. Rashawn Stevenson looked really good. Shouts out to the Patriots for beating the Bengals, and I think the Bengals are going to look better. I just wonder how they're going to look against top tier talent, or top tier teams. So we'll see. Probably one of the most exciting games of Sunday was the Texans and Colts. I said that this was going to be a sneaky good game because you have, Anthony Richardson returning. You have C.J. Stroud and the newly formed offense, or newly formed pretty much team that is the Texans. And this game did not disappoint. The Texans beat the Colts 29-27. It's going to take a minute for the Texans to integrate all their pieces. When you bring on a personality like Stephon Diggs to a receiving core that has Tank Dell, that has Nico Collins, that's going to take a minute. You also have Dalton Schultz. You also have Joe Mixon now at the running back position. It's going to take a minute to figure everything out. And that's kind of what it looked like for the Texans, even though they did win. That is what it looked like for the Texans majority of the game. They were trying to understand. If it wasn't, Joe Mixon saved them a lot, even though I know Stephon Diggs did have a touchdown. Joe Mixon was kind of the main reason why they won. He was able to keep them afloat while C.J. Stroud was still trying to figure out this offense. And obviously you have Danielle Hunter and the defense that is the Texans. They're going to be an extremely good team. Once they figure everybody's tendencies, once they get everything rolling, this team is going to be great. And coming out the gate 1-0 is a perfect start for the Texans. For the Colts, I think it goes. We saw, kind of like with Will Levis, we saw the good and we saw the bad with Anthony Richardson. Look, the things that we know about Anthony Richardson are obviously true. Like we know that Anthony Richardson has a cannon of an arm. We know that Anthony Richardson can extend plays with his legs and is one of the best at it in the NFL. We know the raw talent that Anthony Richardson has. But some of the errant throws, the interceptions, like some of the polish around the size that he still needs is what cost them the game. I think Anthony Richardson is going to be a great player once I think he has all the tools to be an exceptional player. But until he polishes those areas that he needs to polish, he's only going to be a good player. Bro, he launched that. First of all, he launched that 60, 70-yard pass for a touchdown effortlessly. That is what he's capable of doing. But if there's a lot of layups that he misses. And there's a lot of layups, a lot of easy plays that he doesn't even see. I think once you iron that out, he's going to be perfect. He's going to be great. But until then, you're going to lose games that you probably should win. Obviously, you'll win some, but the Texans should have won this game. I mean, no, the Colts should have won this game. Or they could have. Let's say not should. Could have. But they lost to the Texans. So, shouts out to the Texans for beating the Colts 29-27. Speaking of a team that should have won, the Dolphins beat the Jaguars 20-17. Now, I'm going to address the whole Tyreek Hill thing at the end. I think that should be a separate topic. So, don't think I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to address the Tyreek Hill incident separately. But back to this game. The Dolphins didn't play too well. Tua didn't have the best game. Tyreek played, well, he had that 80-yard bomb that he caught. The Jaguars, in all intents and purposes, should have won this game. But the things that have plagued the Jaguars for the longest is what reared its ugly head on Sunday. The Jaguars struggle immensely with turning the ball over, whether we talk about fumbles, whether we talk about interceptions. And they fumbled this game away, bro. They should have won the game, but if it wasn't for their mistakes, is why they lost. Yo, they were the better team. They just, self-inflicted wounds is going to kill you every time. I promise you that. And they kept the door ajar for a team that is a good team. And what do you know? The Dolphins won. So I think the Jaguars are going to be cool. But again, the issues that they've struggled with reared its ugly head on Sunday. So we will see. But shouts out to the Dolphins for beating the Jaguars 20-17. The Saints beat the Panthers 47-10. Now, I'm not going to crap on the Saints. Shouts out to Derek Carr, had the game of his life. I think the layups, everything that the Saints were firing at all cylinders, bro. The Saints were saying, yo, we're about to make an example out of y'all, and they did. You had Derek Carr talking crap to the players, like the defense. It was just a complete bloodbath for the Panthers. Like, Derek, you had Rashid Shaheed, and he caught a bomb like the first drive of the game. No one could do any wrong for the Saints. The story of this game, honestly, is the Panthers. I don't want to put Bryce Young in the bust category yet. I think that you want to surround him. Let me walk you guys through my mindset, through my thinking. I don't want to call Bryce Young a bust because it's a struggle when you have a team that isn't necessarily equipped to the Panthers. There was a reason why they were the worst team last year. They just didn't have the right coach. They didn't have the right personnel around him. So it's very hard to succeed when everything around you isn't working. So while he did struggle immensely last year, I was slow to call him a bust because it's like I want to see what he looks like around a competent team. And the Panthers did a lot of movement this offseason. Like a lot. Both in the draft, both free agency. They acquired a lot. And they looked just as bad on Sunday as they had last year. And Bryce Young looked horrible. His first pass of the day was an interception. And I don't want to call him a bust, bro, because he hasn't even finished his second year. But the more and more I'm looking at Bryce Young, he just doesn't get it. It just feels like he is unable to catch up to the game. He can't see over the offensive line. He looks terrible. And on top of that, for a team that got a new coach, for a team that made a bunch of moves, they looked just as bad on Sunday as they did last year. And this is the same team that gave up pretty much Caleb Williams, that gave up DJ Moore to draft Bryce Young over CJ Stroud, who, might I add, won on Sunday and won the Offensive Rookie of the Year last year. Man, the present and the future looks extremely bleak for the Panthers. Like, ugh. And so shouts out to the Saints for beating them 47-10. And this is a Saints team that struggled offensively last year and didn't really get marginally better outside of Derek Carr got healthy. So, yeah. I don't want to call him a bust, but we'll see, man. We'll see. Because right now, I'm ready to throw that man. He's in the trash bin. He's in the trash bin. I'm not there yet as to empty the bin out, but I'm close. Ooh, speaking of empty the bin, you know who I am ready to empty the bin on? Daniel Jones, bro. The Vikings beat the Giants 28-6. Yo, do you realize Sam Darnold is the starting quarterback for the Vikings? Do you remember how Daniel Jones has looked in his previous situations? Daniel Jones is not good, or hasn't been good. Now you can say that every single place he's gone it hasn't worked for him because of the place. Cool. And I will give him much credit, bro. The Vikings, he looked incredible on Sunday. But do you understand how crazy it was when you compare how Sam Darnold looked to how Daniel Jones looked? But Daniel Jones threw a pick six, bro. One of the worst pick sixes he threw damn near the same pick six that Shadur Sanders threw. The Giants are going to be terrible this year if they continue to hitch their ride on Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones, again, it's kind of like Russell Westbrook to a sense of, if you've been something for so long, even if 1 year you look drastically different, if you've been something for so long, how do you expect them to change? Daniel Jones hasn't been good for a while. I understand he had that really good year with the first year with Brian Daboll, but he hasn't been good since, and he wasn't good before. And now you're losing to the Vikings 28-6. against Sam Darnold and a defense, might I add, that lost a bunch over the offseason. This is also a team that, up until his injury, was expected to start J.J. McCarthy. Boy, it's going to be a long season for the Giants, bro. And shouts out to the Vikings for beating the Giants. The Chargers beat the Raiders 22-10. I think this was the battle of the can't get rights, bro. Like this was a terrible game to watch. Justin Herbert wasn't great. The biggest storyline of this was there was a fight that happened. But again, it's very hard. How are you expect to be great when you don't have much around you? I don't know if you've seen the roster that is the Chargers right now, but it ain't looking too sweet, you know? And the Raiders had a chance to win. It's just I will kind of put this loss on Antonio Pierce, bro. The game that he called was kind of iffy, but I'm not saying that's indicative of who he is as a coach. I'm just saying this was probably a bad game. And the Chargers, their defense their defense was great. Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa finished the game. Their defense was incredible. Asante Samuel, Derwin James, yeah, they were just better than the Raiders. So shouts out to them. The Seahawks beat the Broncos 26-20. Again, I kind of look at the Seahawks. I kind of look at the Broncos and Bo Nix the same way I looked at the Bears. It just looked like the game was too fast for Bo Nix. I think it's obviously as you play, they're going to get better, but there was just it didn't seem like Bo Nix really had a grasp on things throughout the entirety of the game. And while the Seahawks didn't play much better, neither did Geno Smith. The moments that he had to come through, he did. But yeah, the Broncos, they have a tough road ahead, and I think it's going to get easier, obviously, as you play for Bo Nix. But yeah, this team's not going to be that good at all, honestly. And yeah, I think the Seahawks did what they were supposed to do, and Bo Nix it's going to take some time, but Bo Nix looked like all of the rookie that he is, just like Caleb Williams looked like all the rookie that he is. So, shouts out to the Seahawks for beating the Broncos 26-20. The Bills beat the Cardinals 34-28. Everything that I thought would be the case for the Bills was. This team is only going to go as far as Josh Allen takes them. There is not much talent offensively. Yes, you have Keon Coleman, and he's great. He had an incredible catch. But this team is only going to go as far as Josh Allen takes them. And Josh Allen struggled, at least with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, struggled with a loaded roster. This roster is not loaded. Defensively, they're not that great. You allow the Cardinals, and honestly, the Cardinals could and should have won. If Kyler Murray looked to his right and you saw Marvin Harrison Jr. wide open for a touchdown, they probably would have won this game. Could have won this game. But yeah, I don't think the Bills are going to be that good this year. Let me not say that. I think the Bills are going to be okay. I just think that there's a lot on Josh Allen's shoulders, and we saw that game one. If Josh Allen wasn't Superman, the Cardinals definitely would have won this game. And they should have won this game again if Kyler Murray just looked right. But obviously that's easier said than done when you have pressure in the face. But yeah, I think Josh Allen showed why he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and he's going to need to show that for 16 more games. So shouts out to the Bills for beating the Cardinals. We've gotten to that point. The Bucs beat the Commanders 37 to, I think, 20. Let's talk about the positives for the Commanders. Jaden Daniels looked all of what we thought he'd look like. He looked incredible. Yeah, there were times when he looked like a rookie, and there was times when, it looked like the game was a little too fast for him. But most of the time, he looked like the best player on the field when he was on the field. Like, he looked great. The future should be extremely bright for the Commanders with Jaden Daniels. I think that this was the first game. He's going to get much better. He's going to get a field sense better. He looked great. Brian Robinson looked great at the running back position. He looked incredible. He was a workhorse. The offensive line didn't let him down. Neither did they let down Jaden Daniels. The offense wasn't the biggest problem. And that is all of the positives I have for you. I think Washington has the worst secondary in the NFL. And that is even with the Panthers. That's even with the Bengals, the Falcons. The Commanders have the worst secondary in all of football. We had the worst defense last year, and it looks like that trend, at least for the secondary, is going to continue. Let me first say shout out to the Bucs, bro. The Commanders had Baker Mayfield looking like prime Tom Brady. You had Rasheed White look like LT. They had Mike Evans looking like prime Randy Moss. They had Chris Godwin looking like prime Antonio Brown. Don't get me wrong. Mike Evans is probably one of the best, one of the best wide receivers in the league. The one that doesn't get much talk about for some reason. But, yeah, bro, it's going to be a long season for the Commanders. All because of that defense. We're going to lose a lot of games because our defense can't stop anybody, bro. Shouts out to the Bucs, man. The Rams, the Lions beat the Rams 26-20. This was a rematch of the playoff game a year ago where Matthew Stafford returned to Detroit. I'll say this here, man. If you get Jameson Williams playing the way he's playing, if you get Jahmyr Gibbs playing how he was playing, if you get David Montgomery, if you get Amon-Ra St. Brown, who didn't really have a loud game, Sam Laporta didn't have a loud game, shouts out to the Rams. They try. I mean, even though Puka Nacua did get hurt, and Cooper Kupp had a game. If the Lions, I know it took overtime. Yeah, if the Lions play the way that they play, if they play to their potential, the Lions are the best team in the NFC. And that's over the 49ers. That's over the Eagles. That's over the Cowboys. They are the best team in the NFC. Dan Campbell is an incredible coach. This coaching staff is incredible. The defense with Aiden Hutchinson, even with them losing C.J. Gardner-Johnson. This team, if they're firing on all cylinders the way that they were a lot of Sunday night, you can say that I don't think there's a team better than them in the NFC. That's how good that team can be. And they were playing. I know that the Rams came back and tied it up and essentially forced overtime, but the Lions they are real. They can be real. When they're firing on all cylinders, bro, do you understand how hard it is to stop one person, let alone and they're probably the best roster in at least the NFC. Yeah. Shouts out to the Lions, bro. They can, if they played it the way that they're capable of playing, they are the best team in the NFC, in my opinion. So, we'll see. And the last game I'm going to talk about is the Steelers beating the Falcons 18-10. I talked about it. I hinted about it earlier in the show, man. This is a very important year for Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Obviously, both for different reasons, but at the end of the day, their futures in this league is and will be altered by this year. Could be for the good, it could be for the bad. It just will be altered. And obviously, Russell Wilson didn't play due to a hamstring injury, and Justin Fields had to play. Well, shouts out to Chris Boswell because the kicker, scored 18 of the Steelers' 18 points. There were times when Justin Fields looked really good, but there are also times when he didn't. And I think a report is saying that Justin Fields is probably going to start week 2 against the Broncos, I believe they're playing. I don't know. But I don't think that obviously he looked good at spots, but I don't think that Justin Fields did anything to secure his positioning as the long-term starting quarterback for the Steelers. Now, shouts out to them for winning, but he didn't look good majority of the game. There were flashes, and that's what we've been saying about Justin Fields, bro. He has flashes. He has flashes where he looks all of the player that he was supposed to be in Chicago. But then there are also times when it's just like, yo, who are you throwing to? Whoa, what are you doing? You know? So, and for the Falcons, I think they're gonna need some time for Kirk Cousins to settle in. I mean, you remember he missed most of the season last year for ACL. But at least for the first week, it didn't look as advertised. It looked pretty bad. But we'll see. Shouts out to the Steelers for beating the Falcons. Oh, actually, I also do want to shout out TJ Watt. TJ Watt was the main reason actually why. Now, obviously, Chris Boswell pretty much scored all the points, but if TJ Watt was not on this team, the Steelers would have lost this game. TJ Watt, I know it's game 1, but he's showing why he's probably the front runner, at least right now, after game or week 1, to be Defensive Player of the Year, and why there was a huge argument as to he should have won it last year. He wreaked havoc, and again, if it wasn't for him, the Steelers would not have won. So shouts out to them, bro. That has been week 1 of the NFL season, man. There were some incredible games, and I'm excited to see what this season holds, man. So let's move forward. And I said I was going to address the Tyreek Hill thing separately, and that's what I'm going to do now. If you didn't hear about it, Tyreek Hill was arrested or detained or whatever you want to call it before the game. There was at first pictures and videos of him just being on the ground in handcuffs. They were saying that he was driving reckless to the game, which he was like a couple streets away from the arena. And there were conflicting stories. You saw Calais Campbell say some things. Jonnu Smith says some things, saying that, no, that it wasn't exactly what they said. And there was excessive force used for Tyreek Hill. That's what you heard from Calais Campbell. That's what you heard from Jonnu Smith, two players that we heard was at the scene. Then we saw the body cam footage. And everything that Calais Campbell said, everything that Jonnu Smith said, a lot of things, everything that Tyreek Hill said pretty much was the case. It's difficult being a black man, being a black person in the United States. When you hear the term bad apple, when we talk about the police, the first thing you think of is white. And understandably so. When you hear about these countless African Americans that get killed by the police, most of the time, the person that is behind the gun, that is behind the badge, is white. Nearly every single time a black person is in the news from getting shot by the police, most of the time, not all, but most of the time, the person's white. So when you hear about corruption, when you hear about police brutality, when you hear about just unfair treatment of African Americans by the police, the face that they put on it usually is white. But this shows you that it's Tyreek Hill said something. Tyreek Hill said, "What if I wasn't Tyreek Hill? What if Calais Campbell, Jonnu Smith, and I think allegedly Odell Beckham Jr. came to the scene as well? What if they didn't come to help Tyreek Hill?" My thing is, you hear about police and being fearful for their lives. And I'm always like, I understand that. But aren't you trained? Like, you're still scared for your life. You still have to use excessive force when you have 2 or 3 officers for one person that doesn't seem to be aggressive at all. Again, we saw the body cam footage that is well talked and well behaved, and obviously you're having an encounter, so there are some tensions there, but not posing a threat. But you still have to be aggressive. I think the frustrating part about that video and the frustrating part about this entire incident is there is a collective feeling of Tyreek Hill got lucky. He got lucky because he was able to walk away from this. Because there has been countless times that my African American peers have been in situations far less stressful, far less, let's say, intimidating than the situation that Tyreek Hill was in on Sunday. And those people did not come home. Those people were shot on camera. Just a couple months ago, a lady called the cops. She called the cops and ended up dead at her house. I don't know what needs to be done. I would say that this is a wake-up call, but we know good and goddamn well it's not. Bro, we just had another school shooting. Another school shooting. Another school shooting. This time, homie was... I'm not even going to call him homie. The killer was targeting special ed kids. Kids with autism. A class with autism. And there's still debate about gun reform. Another school shooting. So what I'm saying is, it's sad that there is a collective feeling of Tyreek Hill was lucky. That he is Tyreek Hill, that Calais Campbell, Jonnu Smith appeared, that the body cam footage worked. Because we know way too many times when the African Americans, both man and woman, are far in the right, not pose a threat at all, minding their business a lot of times, sleep in their own home, at a park, eating candy and drinking tea, on the side of the street, walking home, running, doing a light jog around the neighborhood, going to a sleepover. There's been countless times where black people have found themselves on the wrong end of the right situation when they were just doing nothing. So I thank God that Tyreek Hill is safe. And I don't care if you're white, you're Hispanic, which were those cops with Tyreek Hill. If you're black, I don't care. I don't know how many times something needs to be done from the police force. One of my best friends is in the police force. And it's not like I don't look at him differently, but it is conversations to be had that, like, yo, why has this happened so many times? Like, why does this continue to happen? And it's bigger than cops. Why is it that African Americans cannot be safe in their existing? Again, the lady that she went to a sleepover with her friends. Is never seen again. They had a black dude was found rolled up in wrestling mats at school and had the audacity to tell us that it was an accident. He slipped and fell. This is yet another example that there's two different realities for people. And I'm glad Tyreek Hill is safe. I think I'm going to leave it at that. I was going to talk about Angel Reese. I hope that she gets better. I know that she's out for the season with a wrist injury. And I was going to talk about Kendrick. I wanted to end on, Kendrick, but I think I'm going to stop right there. I'm thankful that Tyreek Hill is safe. Because, and the worst part about this whole thing is, if he wasn't, like if this went left quickly, which it could have, this would have been the news story for 3 or 4 days and then it's over with. Because that's how desensitized and that's how normal this stuff is at this point. There you have it. That's been today's episode of the Unpopular Podcast. I truly, truly appreciate you guys. If you want an Unpopular Podcast shirt, hoodie, sweater, long sleeve, joggers, links in the description below. I have multiple different colors, multiple different designs. Get your Unpopular Podcast merch today. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm trying to reach as many subscribers as possible. I appreciate all you guys. If you like the content, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to subscribe. It definitely means a lot. Also, please subscribe to the DSPs, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever you get your Unpopular Podcasts. Please follow, please subscribe. It definitely means a lot. No platform is more important than the other, so wherever you get your DSPs, please follow. Also, please follow the socials. Follow Instagram, follow TikTok. I post pretty much daily. Whether you get reels, whether you get stories, we can go back and forth. Just keep it respectful, and I don't mind going back and forth with you. It just means that you're listening to me and you're very passionate about whatever we're talking about. So I appreciate you guys. Please follow. Until next time, much love.